Real quick, before we get started, this episode features Scott Fish. He's allowing me to give out one entry into the Scott Fish Bowl. Here's how you win. To be entered to win, listen to this podcast. Find the answer to the question, what did Scott Fish's wife joke about when suggesting a theme for SFB? Send your answer to Kacey Kasem, ff@gmail.com. That's KACEYKASEMFF@gmail.com with the subject line SFB contest. Answer the question and also provide your name, Twitter handle, and email address. Contest will run from Monday, May 24th until Sunday, May 30th at 7 o'clock Eastern. One winner will be selected at random from correct entries. You can only enter once. Thank you again, and here we go. Howdy, everyone. Kacey Kasem here with another episode of Get Real. And on this week's episode, I chatted it up with Scott Fish, the creator of one of fantasy football's favorite events ever, the Scott Fish Bowl. If you don't know what SFB is, or you're just wanting to hear more about it, this is the podcast episode for you. We talk a ton and in depth about SFB. We also talk about life, including how he became full-time in this industry, his family, and the charity aspect of fantasy football. We also talked a lot about podcasting, some of his food takes, and music. Plus, there was plenty more that we talked about. You can find Scott on Twitter at ScottFish24. He co-hosts the podcast Commission Impossible with former Get Real guest Ryan McDowell. You can also find him on Fantasy Football Weekly with Paul Charchian, another prior Get Real guest. You really need to listen to this full episode because it's so awesome. You can find me on Twitter at @TheKaceyKasem. You can find the podcast on Twitter at GetReal_pod. My writing can be found with the Fantasy Footballers at thefantasyfootballers.com. This podcast is a proud member of the DAP Network. Please feel free to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. It's because of people like you that this podcast continues to grow. If you're enjoying the podcast, think about donating $1 or $2 a month to help the pod continue to grow. You can find the Get Real Patreon at patreon.com/Kacey Kasem. Thank you again. And here's my conversation with Scott Fish.
Okay.
Hey.
Okay. Hey, oh, look at that.
Hey.
You got an overlay on this, I see.
Yeah. You know, not because of me,
I like the draft boards in the background. That's pretty slick. Is that from the all women's league you do, or?
Yeah. So the couple of them, 3 of them. So yeah.
That's awesome. That's so awesome.
I think I have more. I just can't find them. So, I'm sure they got when we moved. I'm sure they got mixed up or lost or something.
That happens. My home league's been going for 20 years. Not 20 years. This upcoming year will be our 30th year. And I used to keep all the boards, and then I'd move and throw them away. And then, but we've always done they go away. It's not a big deal.
Some of them I'm okay with them being in the past, you know.
Yeah, I'm sure. That's that's awesome though. I love that you got that league going down there.
Yeah, it's really cool, and yeah, we should be good to go again this year. So looking forward to that. So what have you been up to since, we know you as a man of many talents, but what have you been up to lately?
Just lots and lots of work, just swamped. Lots of podcasts, lots of shows, lots of everything. It's fun though, right? Like, yeah. I mean, it's my full-time job. So like, I can't complain too much that my full-time job is doing fantasy stuff every day, but it becomes a grind when you don't have a day off for 4 years. You know what I mean?
I can only imagine. Yeah. So I want to talk to you about, doing this full time. But first, I want to ask to kind of get the background story of Scott Fish,
Sure.
So first off, where did you grow up when, you were just a little tyke?
Wow. We're really digging
way back in the vault. Here we go.
Sure. I grew up on the northern edge of Minnesota and Canada there, up in Ely, Minnesota. Way up on the range with the Yashar Yabetcha, don't you know, kind of accents going on. I was there, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years, something like that. Moved to the cities. Then I moved to the town that I eventually went to college in. But I've moved probably 14, 15 times. But I grew up in that border of Minnesota, Canada. Now I live in Twin Cities. I'm more of a city guy. I grew up in a lot of rural towns, a lot of small towns, and I enjoyed it. But I think I was always more meant to be a city kid, I think.
Were you a fan of sports when you were growing up?
Oh yeah, yeah. From the jump, I think some of my earliest memories are some of those '80s, Vikings and Twins teams. So I feel like I've always been a sports fan. It's yeah, I don't know. I think you gravitate to it at some point. Like my son, I never thought he'd be into sports. He's 8 now, but for the first 5.5, 6 years of his life, he was into like putting on plays and writing scripts, and he read and wrote all the time. Like he was and he draws better than I do it. He drew at age 5. He was drawing comics that are better than I could ever draw at age 41. So I thought he was going to be the really artsy one. And my now 3-year-old could throw a ball better than my 6-year-old could, or my 8-year-old could when he was 6. Like my 3-year-old is super like coordinated but now that he's 8, my son is like he's heavy into more sports than I am. He's watching football, wow. He's watching basketball, he's into everything. So I think it just turns at some age. And I think for me, that was probably mid to late 80s when the Twins got Kirby Puckett and things were good.
So you said that he watches all the sports. Does he have a favorite team or a favorite player?
Oh, get this. Okay. So 2 years ago, he decided his favorite team in the league was the Chiefs. Like this is mid-season. He was big on the Chiefs and Ravens, and then he shifted to the Chiefs, and then they won the Super Bowl. And so then the next offseason, Tom Brady goes to the Bucs, and like he only knows really big names, so. Right. So Tom Brady goes to the Bucs, and he sees what's going on there with like those guys, and so he's like, I'm going to be a Bucs fan this year. And then the Bucs win the Super Bowl. Like he's not a front runner; he's picking them before.
Can the Cowboys be his team? That'd be really awesome.
that is a pretty good joke to throw out there. That who are you picking this year, Ian? Because it's the last 2 years he has jumped on the bandwagon, so to speak, well before they won it. So I don't know how to break it to him that the team he roots for isn't going to win the Super Bowl every year. That's not a thing.
He has a track record. I get it.
Yeah, so far so good, I guess.
So good. Let's see. So, and he was the one. Was he doing like ADP of animals or something like that? And all this. I just remember
he did like to do that kind of stuff. Like he did like to draft things. Like so he's already built up for this. But yeah, he used to do drafts of his favorite animals and stuff like that. Yeah, and it was fun when he was like 3, 4, and that he thought like snowmen were animals and things. But nowadays he's an 8-year-old. He's huge too.
Wow.
My kids are huge. My 8-year-old is 4'6". It doesn't feel like an 8-year-old should be that big, but
no, not at all. And and I mean, the people who have been around for a while have been following, your whole journey into where you are now. And, before you even had the second kid, we remember, the pregnancy announcement, you telling, everybody, and just like kind of following your path has been really, really rad. So
I throw my life out there, I feel like people can connect with, I think it's one way people connect with me.
For sure. I mean, and we all really enjoy the interaction that we all have with each other because of you. So I want to know how did you start playing fantasy football in the first place?
Oh, sure. That was in 1992. I started playing Dynasty because that's the only way I knew how to play. My dad ran this. He didn't run it. My dad was in a Big Ten fantasy basketball league with a bunch of other teachers. And what they did was they would draft incoming freshmen and they would keep them throughout their college career. So when I started playing fantasy sports, that's what I assumed fantasy sports was. Like in 92, when we drafted our NFL players, I was like, okay, you draft these players and you just keep them. So we were unwittingly, and dynasties existed since like the 70s. It's not like that. But that's all I knew, for many, many years is that just kept your players. But yeah, it started in 92, did rookie and free agent drafts every year. It was a small 6-team league to start. It was then an 8-team league for a while. Then it grew, but touchdown only. Got the information from the newspaper on Monday and Tuesday mornings. When we watched games, like the game breaks were a big deal to us, and like that do. I mentioned this just the other day to someone, but that when that thing would pop up and they would show the scores from the other games and who had scored touchdowns, huge deal. It's so weird to think now we're in an age where, if our scores don't update quick enough, we're like, come on.
Right.
And then we wouldn't sometimes know until Tuesday if someone got a touchdown. It was crazy when you think back on it. But yeah, started in 92 and I loved it since. I didn't even make my way into the industry for another 10 plus years or so.
Did you play any other, or do you play any other fantasy sports besides just football?
I played them all then, especially late 90s. The late high school, early college age type of like that era. I played every fantasy sport. Like you name the sport, I tried out fantasy hockey. Even I even in high school, I remember trying out a fantasy NASCAR league. Wow. And I'm not interested in NASCAR at all. Like it's just nothing, like it just doesn't interest me, but I still tried it. Fantasy basketball I liked a lot. Fantasy basketball and fantasy baseball I was very good at because I would make transactions every day. I would just churn those rosters constantly, and I was actually decent at, despite not actually knowing players to the depth that I did for football. I was good at it because I was super active. But as I got older, I just shifted really, really into football, and now I don't even play any other fantasy sports. I just play fantasy football.
Well, fantasy baseball, I tried that before, and it really is a lot of work that you have to put into it. And I just, it's already.
Every couple of years, someone talks me into a fantasy baseball league or fantasy basketball league, and I realize really quickly that I don't love it.
Yeah, I get that. So how did you make your way into the fantasy industry in the first place?
Sure. So I came into the fantasy space really, branching out, trying to find information on something that I called at the time farm system leagues that are now called Devy leagues. I searched message boards, AOL chat rooms, etc. Like I was all over just trying to find information on this kind of league that I was running. I was playing with friends, and it just didn't exist. And I eventually got caught up on one message board where there are a lot of fantasy football players, and we all got along, you become part of a community. And that site eventually asked me to do their start sit article and their waiver wire article every week. So I started writing on that, and that was in the mid 2000s. And a couple of years into that, they asked me if I wanted to be a co-owner of the site, and I realized I didn't. I realized, you know what? I want to do this on my own. And I created my own site, brought along a guy or two from that message board and some other friends. And we focused on PPR leagues and IDP leagues and these developmental leagues, which, because those things weren't very popular back then in the mid 2000s, like you Google searched PPR or IDP, we were the first page of Google. So our site grew quickly and that's, I kind of made my name for myself in the industry, being the first guy with Devy rankings, the first guy with the Devy podcast, the first guy with Devy articles. That's where I started. That's how I kind of broke through, answering a question that wasn't being answered out there and being the only source for that information on that topic. And, my career has shifted several times since I've been in the industry, but that's where I jumped into it, is trying to find an answer, trying to find people that did this type of league, and it grew into much, much more down the line.
Do you think that kind of situation still holds true now, that if you can find something that people aren't tapped into yet, or do you think that the well's pretty much dry and you just kind of have to rise to the top?
I don't think it's dry at all. Even in the Devy space, Ray GQ has done some awesome work, and he became I feel like he's become the guy of Devy now. There are several of them doing amazing work out there, but I think even in a space that's niche like that, you can become the guy, and it doesn't even have to be that. I think Matt Harmon's a great example of this, that he went out looking for answers to a question that wasn't answered out there, and he created Reception Perception to answer the questions he had about wide receivers and how they win their routes and whatnot. And he forged his path that way, and I feel like there's lots of different avenues out there. There's Graham Barfield made, yards created and stuff like that. Sean Siegel with his zero RB theory, which, Matt Waldman had a similar theory, differently named, kind of a different mentality to it. Paul Charchian before that also had do the opposite. And his wasn't about fragility. It was about, just doing the opposite that everybody else was doing in your draft, zagging when other people are zigging, right? And, it was the same method of drafting, young wide receivers first instead of these running backs that could get injured or running backs that everybody else is drafting. But I feel like there are lots of different avenues for people still. I don't think it's tapped. And I think with the advent of betting coming more and more mainstream in all these, in all these different states, there's going to be legalization in fantasy sports in a lot more places. I think it's just going to open up more doors and more avenues for content. I don't think it's tapped at all. I think it's tougher to break through because there's so many of us, but I don't think it's tapped yet.
I like that answer. So before you went full time with being in the fantasy football industry, what exactly were you doing outside of, your part-time, fantasy football stuff?
Yeah. So I was a full-time, well, obviously I was full-time. My job was, I worked for Pepsi. I threw cases, I wrote orders sometimes, did stuff like that. I didn't drive the trucks or anything. I actually, people would deliver pop to stores and I'd go into those stores and I would fill the shelves and I had jobs before that. I ran a video store. I was I assistant director at a Renaissance festival. I did a bunch of other stuff. I missed that video store job, man. I loved working at a video store, watching videos before they came out all the time. Movies people had never heard of. I love that. But I worked Pepsi for 14, 15 years. I just it was nice to do manual labor and just, be in your own head, listen to podcasts all night long while you're just throwing cases, working hard, and kept me in shape too. I could eat whatever I want for those 14 years because I knew I had a 12-hour work shift of lifting hundreds of thousands of pounds every night and putting them on shelves. But that was my job before that, was just, a manual labor job, and it was starting to wear down on my back, and full-time opportunities in the industry came at the right time for me to get out and, for my health and for my family,
Yes. And when you were growing up, what did you want to be when you grew up? Because being in a fantasy football industry really wasn't a thing that, kids were saying they wanted to be. So
no. Had I known, I might have. Yeah,
right.
Had I known that was an actual real job, I might have wanted to be that. But no, growing up, I wanted to be a teacher. My dad's spent my mom was a teacher for a little bit. My dad was a teacher his whole career. He taught for 35, 40 years before he just retired a few years ago. And that all their friends were teachers. That was what I wanted to do. I wanted to, help people in general, but help kids, grow, help them learn, etc. My dad was a junior high teacher mostly. When I had started out my path to potentially be a teacher, I went down and assistant taught in elementary schools. I felt I was probably going to be younger kids, right? But I switched quickly after a year or two, and I went into business management and stuff like that. That's where my passion started to lie. And now that at this point in the fantasy industry, this has come in great because I'm really into the legal side and the business side of fantasy. That's the face people don't usually see. Most of my job nowadays in the fantasy industry is behind the scenes in business and in the legality of fantasy sports. That's I have a lot of passion for that now. So that did end up playing a part of what I do full time, I guess now.
Yeah, and you're still teaching people, every day you're teaching us something. And I got my degree in child learning and development because I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna use that. And now, yeah, so
Yeah.
totally how your paths can just up and change. So
Yep.
I want to talk about something that has probably impacted a ton of people in the fantasy football industry. Obviously, if people are tuning into this podcast, this is probably one of the biggest things they want to hear about is Scott Fishbowl, because we are in that season right now where everybody is, waiting for their invitations and, tweeting it and everything. It's just such an awesome time of the year. So how did this I know it's a long story, but you know what? I want to hear it. And so do, everybody that's tuning in. So how did the Scott Fishbowl actually come about?
So that site that I ran that we focused on PPR and IDP and Debbie stuff was called FF Oasis, and we started this what's now known as the Fishbowl as the FF Oasis Invitational. A guy named Mike Kaus actually mostly ran it for us, right? Like he was one of the guys that came over from that message board, and we ran this FF Oasis Invitational, got people from around the industry to join in and play. We got like Mike Clay, and we got Jeff Hasley, who's with Football Guys, and he's still in. We got Shane Hallam. He's going to be doing Draft Countdown coming up, but he's wrote lots of places. We had lots of industry guys from around the industry that a lot of them are gone now. That's just kind of how the industry works. That was 11 years ago, so a lot of them are gone now. But we just got them to play with our readers and our listeners, and we filled a 96 team tournament the first year. And 96 seems so small now, but it was really big then, because it's not really what people did. And we had people disappear, people stop managing. Like it wasn't hugely popular, but we thought it was a great idea. We brought it back the second year, and we only did 60 teams because we wanted more dedicated people, and it was okay. The third year, I took the year off because my wife was pregnant. Like I had a lot going on. We took the year off from that. And then the next year I came back and I said to myself, I saw the vision for this. Like I saw that this could be a thing. Like people want to play with these industry analysts. People like it just feels like this could be a thing. And I pushed. Like I still remember, like nowadays I don't do anything. I just let it come in. But back then I remember just sliding into the DMs of the people that followed me that I barely interacted with, but they were like a well-known analyst. People just every year just jumping into DMs of people being like, you should play in this league. And I remember the first time I met Matthew Berry, I came up to him, I talked to him about it. I'm like, you got to play in this league. And he didn't play that year, but like he he became aware of it, and then the following year he played. I just kept pushing, and then I stopped pushing because now people just jump in. But the start of it was just a reader league for fans, and then it just grew and grew and snowballed. And one analyst sees that another guy's in, and they're like, or girl, and they're like, sorry, I have major tornadoes and stuff going on here, so even my phone's going off. Hey, emergency. So I'm going to shut this off. There we go. Even with the do not disturb on, it's still going off and bothering our show. But I lost my train of thought there. But basically, once one person plays, another person will be like, oh, that person's playing, I'll play. Mm-hmm. And it just keeps snowballing like that for 11 years until everybody's playing in it.
Everybody's playing. And do you think that the Scott Fishbowl has been instrumental in people becoming, in the fantasy industry?
Oh, absolutely. There's absolutely no question of that. I know, I'm not going to name names or try to go through a list because there are so many that I feel like I'm going to leave people out. But I know people that have become full-time in this industry who were not even analysts when they got into their first SFB, and they met connections. They started doing podcasts and articles, and eventually they got a full-time job or part-time job. There are people, this industry is littered with people who were just fans entering SFB and are now writing for sites because they connected with people running sites and they're like, hey, come write for me, come try it out. That is probably my single favorite thing about SFB is the networking and the connections people make. And like, I feel like the community keeps growing bigger and bigger. And I think SFB has a little bit to do with that. I think that it connects so many people and people realize, hey, I can do this. I can write or podcast. I can join your show. And once they write that first article or jump on that first podcast, they realize that wasn't so bad. Why was I afraid? Why was I scared to do this? It's enjoyable. And what it is we're a community of people with the same interests. Mm-hmm. And when you go on a show, the people running the show want you to do good. Like they want you to look good. They want the show to be good. There's nothing to be afraid of. Jump on the show, jump on a podcast, do it. It's really fun. But I absolutely know for a fact there are a ton of people in this industry that came because of SFB and it makes me smile. Like it warms me to think about.
That's the reason why I, do what I do now. I'm writing with the fantasy footballers. There's no way that I would have even, Ryan with Fighting Chance Fantasy was like, hey, do you want to write? And I was like, sure. Cause I was in the Scott Fishbowl as a fan for like the first, however many years I was in it, at the beginning.
Fantasy football contest winner.
Football, boom, right there. I won a contest. And it's crazy when you hear people's podcasts and they're giving out, a spot to be in the Scott Fishbowl and how everybody is just like you can feel the buzz in the community. You can just feel that energy. Yeah. So it's super cool.
It is. I love it. I love when people get their invites. They're just so excited. And I don't know how it got to the point where it creates that kind of like Willy Wonka, Charlie, Chocolate Factory type of like golden ticket moment for people. But I love that it's there. I love that I can do something that makes people happy. Sometimes it's those little things that just somehow it makes them really happy. And it's great. It's wonderful.
We love it so much. And guys and gals, if you want your podcast or your YouTube video or whatever to like get a bunch of downloads and get a lot of traction, do an episode devoted to Scott Fishbowl because I eat that content up and I know other people do too. So
it's good. I like that.
I mean, for real. Because you see people like actually, like, how does that make you feel to see people like writing articles or doing specific podcasts just based off of something that you just came up with and didn't see growing the way it did?
Yeah, it's surreal is what it is. Like it doesn't even feel real. It's to the point that I understand that it's a thing. It's just, I don't even, like here's something. I have a little bit of imposter syndrome. I know that, like, I know other people, like I talked to Ryan McDowell about this. Heath Cummings mentioned it the other day too, that like, you feel like, why is this what thing that I'm doing? Like, why do people listen? Why is it why is it popular? It's like, I have self-doubt, right? Like every year I get this twinge of doubt. Like, is this the year that SFB is going to be done? Like, people aren't going to be as interested in it. Like, it's just going to be a thing that happens, because there have been years that it's just like, it takes over Twitter and like people are ecstatic. And I feel like one of these years, just people aren't going to be interested in it. And it hasn't happened yet, but, yeah, it's really surreal. It's every year I'm surprised by the fact that it's still a thing that people are excited about. And I love every minute of it. I'm happy they do too, because it has helped push this thing that I've gone on podcasts and radio for years. And my tag, when people would be like, tell us what you got going on, etc. My tag, I would always throw in there, consider giving 1 entry fee to charity. It's so little. It's something your league can do. There are 100,000 leagues. If you give 1 entry fee, your league's not going to miss it. 100,000 leagues, we can do a ton of good. I would throw that at the end of every show I would do. And I feel like SFB has brought that charitable aspect to fantasy, like really to the forefront, really made a reality out of it. And so I guess the answer to your question, long-winded answer to your question is when I see that people are writing about SFB or talking about it on their podcasts or on SiriusXM or whatever it is, I think to myself, that's one more place where I know that they're going to mention adding charity to like being philanthropic with your leagues. And I think to myself, that's an awesome thing. That's an awesome thing that mentality and that message is getting pushed out there. So I think that's the best part about SFB being so popular.
And a lot of celebrities, I mean, a lot to me, I mean, there's a handful of celebrities that have signed up to be in the Scott Fish Bowl. So how has that been? What were the feelings going through your head when you saw their names come through?
Yeah, I'm still a little surprised by it sometimes. Some of them, some of them are reached out to, and some of them just signed up. Like I'm trying, I'm on the spot here, but like Tom Everett Scott, I believe I probably reached out to because he has been playing for several years. And James Roday was introduced to me by a friend in the industry that, we should get him in. And, so I believe there's an email connection made there and he jumped in, and there's, some TV showrunners. Scott Porter from Friday Night Lights jumped in. Mike Mills from REM plays. He was introduced by another SFB player. Jerry Ferrara is going to play this year. Turtle from Entourage, he's jumping in. Shane Battier is the one that I find really interesting because he signed up last year, did not reach out, didn't try to use the I'm Shane Battier, right. He signed up as a normal person, just signed up on the scottfishbowl.com website. And Ryan either we have a random fan button that we press the button and it puts someone in SFB, just a random person. Cause we feel like that's important to be able to just randomly put people in SFB, just, you have the same shot as everybody kind of thing, and I think he pressed the random button, but he might've just been going through the fan list or whatever. And he saw Shane Battier and he checked it out. And it was the Shane Battier verified Twitter account following 29 people. But among those 29 people were me and Ryan. We're like, okay, so maybe this is actually Shane Battier. I just found this out this year. He actually signed up the year before and did not get in. In fairness, there was a typo in his email, but he signed up 2 years in a row, but he's in now. He's awesome. He's a very philanthropic guy. So like he's a great person to have in the league.
Is there anybody that hasn't been in the league that you would really want to be in the league? That's just, maybe it's out of left field, or maybe it's somebody that likes fantasy football.
I've actually had this question before, and I've thought to myself, there are a couple that, elude me. Like, I feel like they're, almost everyone in the industry plays, and even tangential to the industry. But there are some like the Mina Kimes types and the Cynthia Freeland types that I would absolutely love if they played, especially, to show, I love having more representation in SFB. In fact, this year I'm through the moon that we have like 250 women in this thing already, right? Like there's so many women playing in this, but it would be great to have someone well-known like that to be in SFB. So those are two that come to mind off the top of my head.
And I want to know, the name is Scott Fishbowl, so it's named after you. I know, but you're 11 years in, right? So you can't really do anything. So now I can't even say it because I'm so Scott Fishbowl. SFB is kind of like So how does it feel to have your name on a product like this? A product, because it is a product. It's it's a household name.
You know me. Like this is not me. This is like I'm not the guy who wants to throw my name on this on things. What happened? I mean, this is a completely true. This is what happened. So it was the FF Oasis Invitational. I closed the doors down to FF Oasis. in that gap year when my wife was pregnant, I didn't do the tournament. Or it might have been the year. It was right about that time. So I wanted to make this a thing. I went and asked Twitter, because Twitter, they're going to have the answer for me.
Yeah.
Asked Twitter, what should I name this thing now that my site is done? And the number one answer, like every reply, the fishbowl. And I'm like, that makes sense. It kind of makes sense. So I go out and I'm like, fishbowl.com, fishbowl.org, fishbowl. Nothing is available at all. Nothing. So I go out and I'm like, all right, whatever, scottfishbowl.com. That's what I got. And so from there, it became the Scott Fishbowl. And you'll hear me on almost every show or on Twitter. I always call it SFB because I feel awkward calling it the Scott Fishbowl. I know other people do, and that's absolutely cool and fine. I just I have this weird thing. I don't love the name, but it's the Scott Fishbowl now. I get it. And I call it SFB usually. I will say though, it's been great for branding.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like that's been good for my name in the industry to have it be my full name. Like business wise, it was probably a great thing that it ended up that way. But yeah, that's the story behind the name. I don't know how many times I've told that, not a whole lot, but that's the story.
Well, hey, it works, and I really like the logo and how it gets incorporated into the T-shirts every year, and there's all that fun stuff. So
hey, I made that logo.
It is very iconic. It is very iconic.
I like it.
So Scott Fishbowl, SFB. I gotta see. I'm old school, and that's why. But with the SFB, it has every year the rules and the settings seem to be, a little quirky, yes, a little off, a little different, keeping people on their toes. Is there a rule, a setting, something like that you would like to implement into the Scott Fishbowl someday, but you don't think it'll ever work, so you have to kind of scrap it?
Wow. I have done so many shows, and I don't think I've ever been asked that question. Wow. That's a really interesting one, Kacey. I like that. Gosh, is there one that, I think the only thing that I would have ever considered that I've never put in, because I just never would, is that I have for years wanted to do a touchdown only league, because I started doing touchdown only leagues, and the nostalgia, the memory of that being that a touchdown was so important, and it's not super common. Like you'll get a lot of zeros in your lineup each week. And I remember how big of a deal just thinking back to those early 90s years of playing, like, that would be really fun for me, but it'd be fun for nobody else. Like it'd be fun for like a handful of us that remember playing back then. I guess that would be my answer, but really, like, there's nothing I haven't scrapped that I didn't want to implement. What I do with the scoring is, if I want to try to push an agenda in the industry, like points per first down or 3RR, well, I'm not really trying to with that, but like I want to put something out there that to make the industry realize, hey, we can do this in leagues. Like the quarterback scoring last year, you can make good quarterbacks score a lot of points and bad quarterbacks hurt you. I wanted to show that can be done. I wanted to show that points per first down is a meaningful thing in games that you can bring to your leagues. I feel like I've done some fun things like the video game scoring year. I added bonuses that we used to do around the late 90s, early 2000s turn. The bonus scoring, I felt it fit the video game theme. This year, I wanted to show people, hey, there are people who love kickers. There are people who hate them. Let's allow them in the flex, and let's have you duke it out. And maybe, if you hate, maybe it's something you can bring to your league. If you have people in your league that like kickers and don't, maybe it's something you can bring to your league that you can just flex them, and you don't have to use them if you don't want to. And 3RR, the last time I researched it, third round reversal, where the third round reverses the order. Last time I researched it, it either corrected the problem where the top picks usually win the league, or it overcorrected. I've heard it's gotten better, but the statistics do show that if you have a top 3 pick, you have a slightly better chance of winning your league than anywhere else in the draft. And 3rd round reversal tends to help that. My research has said 5th round reversal would be better, but I just want to throw it out there in case people don't realize 3rd round reversal exists and it's something you can bring to your league. So that's kind of what I do with the scoring, but nothing I've never really had anything that I didn't do that I've always wanted to. I don't really have that.
Have you ever thought of doing auction or, some sort of salary cap league like that for the Scott Fish Bowl?
No. Honestly, it's probably just too much for me to handle. What I have considered is having one conference of the Fish Bowl be auction. I have briefly considered that. I've just never. So that's another really good question, Casey. You're really good at this.
You did. No.
Yes. So I have considered having one conference be auction, just to get some auction lovers their due in the Fish Bowl. But I worried what that would do with when all the conferences combined for the playoffs. Like, is that a fair advantage? Is it unfair advantage? Is it because people could probably build super starting lineups and because the leagues are so deep, I don't know how it would affect the balance once it got to the playoffs. So I just never done it. I also thought about doing side SFBs, have the SFB tournament, then have an SFB IDP conference and an SFB auction conference, little one conference SFBs that, play alongside the SFB, but they wouldn't go to the same playoffs. I've thought of a few of those things. I've never done them.
One thing that you wanted to do that you weren't able to do just because of the pandemic and everything was have live drafts.
Right.
I know that everybody was amped about that. And then, life happened and everything else. But for people who have never done live drafts before, why are they so appealing?
Oh man. Oh, you do live drafts. You know,
Yes.
Live drafts are I love live drafts so much. It's actually shocking to me for just in the phrasing of that question for people who have never done live drafts. That.
Yeah.
I feel bad even hearing that sentence because live drafts are so incredibly fun. And I'm not a guy who I'm not a big trash talker on online drafts. I'm not really that guy. I'm not but in live drafts, I will bring it out. It's the kind of thing you can sit and hang out and talk and be in person with a bunch of like-minded folks. And it's just an awesome escape. It's an awesome thing to do. I wish I could pinpoint why they're so awesome, but they are truly one of my favorite things I do still getting alerts over here.
Man.
My wife actually turned on the TV with the because it's
not looking great.
things are a little crazy right now. I'm leaving a pause so you can edit.
Oh yeah. I don't edit. What are you talking about? I'm just kidding.
All right.
I edit enough. Appreciate the pause.
Yeah. So, I wish I could tell you what is so amazing and appealing about them, but imagine getting together with a bunch of friends at a bar and you're just doing something that all of you are super, super interested in. It's an amazing fun thing. And I think we might have some this year, honestly.
Yeah.
Next year is the big year. I have a bunch of things planned that take coordination and working with certain companies, I'll just say, for live events for next year. But this year we might things are starting to open up. There's a potential for a few live events around the country this year, which is going to be interesting. There'll be more pop-up events though.
And how does that make you feel to see how far SFB has grown from where it was when it started out to where it is now, where people want to actually do a live draft?
It's right in that same boat of community. I love seeing that people are connecting, and to take it one step further, they connect in real life. I've done a lot of industry events. I've gone to a lot of industry events, and I've met a very large majority of the people you follow in this industry. Like I've met a lot of them in person, and it's every time you meet one, you think you think you'll be shy or nervous, or like I'm kind of an introvert, but every time I meet one, it's like meeting a friend, like, cause we share so many things in common, so many passions in common. And the thought of that happening at live events all over the country. And when you go to them, like, you'll be meeting not only people that you respect and know online from their work, but you'll meet people you've never met and forge new friendships. And the thought of that, I absolutely love thinking about that.
It is so great to have something so positive and have the fantasy community to be like that. Of course, you always get a bad apple or two, the people that are like, I want to fight and claw to be at the top, and I don't care who I have to, hurt on the way up or whatever, you see. What about when people, because every year there's always a couple of people that come into your mentions and are upset that they don't make it into the Scott Fish Bowl. Yeah. So when that happens, like, how do you deal with that?
I mean, most of the time I don't. Like, every once in a while I'll reply, and I tweeted the other day about this, that 90% of the time I just scroll by, and that 10% I'm annoyed with myself that I replied. And really, I don't get many. So that means, like, out of 30 that have happened this year, I've replied to like 3 of them, like I usually don't reply, but when they get really nasty, I A, don't reply, and B, I don't have to, because half the industry will come to bat for me.
I was just about to bring that up. You have a fan base, and anytime somebody wants to come at you, they're like, whoa, hold on. Scott Fish is the nicest guy, So I'm very happy that you don't see a lot of that.
I don't, and I appreciate it when those people come to bat, because I don't feel like they're coming to bat for. They are coming to bat for me, but I feel like they're really coming to bat for, the mindset and the mentality and what this is all about, the community, the connection, the charity, etc. I feel like that's what they're coming to bat for. They are coming to bat for me, but I feel like that's what they're truly coming to bat for, is they're protecting this event that is trying to do so much good.
And so many people in the industry and so many fans, they do things every year to help out with, donating to Fantasy Cares and donating to their various charities. What are some of the cool things that you've seen in this community that people have done in order to, get those donations?
Oh man. I wish I should write this down sometime, because I've seen so many cool things, and I retweet them, or I talk to people in private. People run lots of different. Well, man, I can go on a couple different tangents, but most of the ones I see are bets on how many points people will score versus each other, and how many, like I remember last year, Cameron McMillan and Brad Evans had a bet, $500 to charity to whoever won their week one, battle last year in SFB. And what ended up happening is they both just ended up donating. Just a beautiful thing. You see a lot of side betting is the majority of what I see, but where I'd like to sidetrack is just that the fact that SFB exists and has pushed this out there I don't think I need to tell you. I think you remember 5 years ago where there were no other charitable tournaments.
Right.
They did not exist. Right. And now you can't turn around without seeing a dozen of them. They're all over. And, I want to make it less about the individual little cool things people do to raise donations, which, I'll mention John Bosch does these eliminators for us that raise a ton of money. And Sal Lito does the potathon that raises a ton of money. everyone gets behind those. But I think SFB's lasting impression is going to be the fact that it created this mindset in the industry where people are doing charitable tournaments for tons of different causes that was not a thing 5 years ago. That was not a thing. And now it is very much a very real thing. And I absolutely love seeing that. That's probably going to be one of SFB's biggest legacies, is that it created that mindset out there that people are doing this on their own.
It's just crazy how you planted this little seed and it just grew and grew and grew, and how we can all come together and it's just mind blowing how that can be a thing.
I just want to put this out there to content producers in general about that, is that when I would go on shows, when I was running my old site, I would mention Devi stuff in every show. I would just I would push it a little bit in each and every show. And then eventually it turned to the point where I was pushing that charitable aspect in every show, just pushing just a little bit. And like you said, like a seed, it just kept growing because I kept pushing just a little bit. And I think that can apply to other things. Like if you have something you truly believe in, something that you've created or you're doing, go on each little show and don't be afraid to just push it just a little bit on every show you do, and it can grow. But we can get back to what you were saying. I feel like that's important for content producers out there, to continue to push what you're trying to do in little ways along your journey, and it can grow.
And it can grow, exactly. So since this has grown and you have a lot of experience now with running a league like this, what is the easiest part of running SFB and the hardest part?
Okay, the easiest part is, to this point, is just getting people to sign up. It's probably the easiest, like having enough people to make SFB happen. Like I don't have to worry about pushing people to sign up anymore, which is a beautiful thing. That about 4 or 5 years ago, I didn't have to push anymore. I had more than enough people wanting to be in it. The hardest part is easily creating the divisions. That's like, there are several hard parts, like coordinating people who make the banners for each division, there's a lot of things that are tough, but figuring out who is going to be in what division is by far the most difficult, because people have their preferences on draft slot. They have preferences on division. There are people who want to play with other people. You want to make sure that each sites aren't doubled up. Like I don't want 4 guys from, ESPN in the same division. I have to split them up. I don't want 3 guys from Dynasty League football in the same division. Got to split them up. So you got to make sure divisions aren't, like, people from the same site aren't in the same division. Like there are a list of rules for figuring out who's going to be in what division. If I just took everybody, randomized them, threw them in divisions, it'd be super easy. But I want to make sure that they're all split up, and for the fans too, right? Mm-hmm. Like fans that come in, they don't want to play with 6 guys from 4 for 4. They might, maybe they're a huge 4 for 4 fan, but you want them to be able to play with analysts from different sites. And the other side of that is you want to build the community. So I want people from a bunch of different sites to play with each other and realize that there are these other sites, that learn about these other sites and connect with each other, So you don't want just a bunch of people. Like that's the hardest part. That's the hardest part, is creating the divisions and making the divisions, diverse in multiple ways.
How do you come up with the themes every year?
Oh man, I don't even know. I honestly don't know. The theme is the toughest part every year. I've gotten to the point where we've done so many themes that I'm struggling to think of ideas each year. This year, we landed on music. And after landing on music, after having the wheels in motion, the idea of influential women came up, which is a great idea for a theme. So we considered this for a bit, and in talking to some women behind the scenes, we realized maybe that's something we do next year, and we do it right. Like if we're going to do that, we're going to do it right. We're going to put up a site. We're going to have these influential women and like write-ups on them so you can learn about them. And like we would want to do it right. So we will stick with music for this year, but we're going to make sure that the musicians, we're going to make sure that it's populated with women, and it's populated with people of color. It's completely diverse, and it's not just a bunch of old white dudes, right? We're going to make sure we do music right. My wife has joked that the theme we should do is foods that I won't eat.
Oh,
because you can easily come up with 100 of those. But that's another trick with the divisions, is thinking of some kind of theme that you can make 100 or 200 divisions of. That is not easy. Every year I struggle with it. So if you have ideas out there, you can let me know.
You were talking about, I want to kind of sidetrack off of SFB for just a second. We'll get back to it in a moment, but
sure.
You were talking about foods that you don't like, and everybody's always associating you with hating pickles, right? I mean, I asked for questions earlier today, and half the people were just asking about pickles related stuff. So to have something that you hate represent you so well. My question to you about pickles is, do you like cucumbers?
I don't.
Okay, good. I don't like cucumbers. I like pickles, but I know they taste completely different, but do you like anything pickled, or is it you don't like anything pickled?
I don't. I have had things that are pickled. I remember I sat down at a restaurant and there was an appetizer, and one of the things were pickled, and I was like, this is really gross. So I know I've eaten things that are pickled. I'm not a fan of them.
Yeah.
But not pickles. I do remember, I believe my 3-year-old was eating a cucumber once, and I immediately wanted to get a paternity test on that kid.
Oh my gosh.
That's not, no, I'm just
that is just not something that Scott Fish would ever pass down,
Yes.
He's like, whose kid is that? No. Yeah, that pickle thing is really funny.
Yeah, people can like what they like. I don't league shame for like playing 10 teamers, playing 8 teamers, playing IDP, Superflex. I don't like what you like. I don't, like fantasy is supposed to be fun.
Right.
Same with food. Like enjoy what you enjoy. I don't like pickles. You can. It's cool.
Yeah.
I don't care. Yeah.
I always find it funny when people get like really, really, really upset about somebody's take on food. Like, I don't like this food. It's like, it's kind of, it doesn't taste the same to them as it does to you.
Exactly.
Sorry,
right? Yeah.
Just like this guy drafted that guy. Well, he likes him better, and that's his, personal preference. Same for food.
Yeah.
So that would be a fun theme to have, I think. Yeah, you should do that. Totally. I can already see the t-shirt designs. I
know food is actually
pyramid.
A pretty good theme. Yeah. Foods that I dislike would be pretty hilarious, but I don't know how hilarious. Like onion rings, where the bread to onion ratio is wrong. Like, I don't know if that would make a good division title, right?
Yeah.
Like, I love onion rings, but if the ratio is wrong, I don't like them. So, yeah.
I'm like that about onion rings too. So I will agree with you on that. Okay, so to wrap up the talk about SFB, I just want to know, like, when the live draft actually happens, like that first day, how often is it where somebody just doesn't log in, and what do you do in a situation like that?
I will say we have been really lucky the last 2 years, and especially last year. We make sure everybody's got their invites, and we are pinging people the week of who hasn't logged in. We are mostly Ryan actually is getting on these guys. Hey, make sure you get logged in. And I think the thing with SFB has gotten to the point, we used to have a lot of issues with this. People would like get in SFB and then they wouldn't show up. SFB is a big enough deal to people now that we have very few people that are like, we didn't even replace a single person last year. Awesome. The year before, I think it was 1 or 2. It's a big enough thing to be in SFB that people make sure to show up. we had that problem in the past. The last couple of years, we've gotten really lucky with it. But yeah, we make sure everybody's logged in the week before. We hit them with messages until they get in.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it is to that point now where people are like so amped about it that they log in way before there's, they need to.
Right.
And, I like my wife will be like, "Why are you drafting right now?" Blah 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 blah. But I told her I was coming on the podcast with you tonight, and she's like, "Oh great, well we better eat now because I'm sure that'll go over or whatever." So, but yeah, I mean, Scott Fishbowl is a big enough thing that even my wife, like she was like, "I can't believe that you haven't already had him on your podcast." I was like, I know, but this is like the perfect time right now because
it is.
We're all getting really jazzed about SFB. So, where can people?
It's coral. It's still coral.
I was going to ask you that. I have this written down. I was like, why can't you see the color pink? People are probably like, what? But okay, back in the day, this is a funny story. Back in the day, my wife, she was my girlfriend at the time, and she was wearing these shorts, and I was calling them pink, and she's like, they're coral. I'm like, they're freaking pink, So I used to do these things back in the day where I put polls up about things that my wife and I do differently, and like to try to get Twitter on my side, I guess, in an argument or whatever, which you shouldn't do. But hey, we have this story. But yeah, Scott totally agreed with my wife. They're coral, and I just don't get it. Okay. But yeah, that was hilarious. Okay. So my last question about Scott Fishbowl, and I guarantee you're not sick of talking about it because it's your baby, but I do want to give the people some more stuff too. But with Scott Fishbowl, what is the importance of paying attention to the league rules and settings? What is the importance? Because a lot of people are used to the leagues that they play in.
Yeah, that's part of why I do SFB the way I do it. Is I change the rules every year. I've already mentioned that sometimes it's to push an agenda in this industry, whether it be, something that's being talked about a lot or something that maybe should be talked about. But I change the rules. It creates draft chaos, which is wonderful. I enjoy that. It's a little evil. But B, it forces people to think outside the box and to put people on more even footing. Like analysts actually have to take a look and go, oh, so if the settings of this, I'm going to have to like nobody can just go on autopilot and be like, oh, this is the best player. I'm going to take him here. Like I've done 100 of these drafts. I know these things. I'm just going to go on autopilot and make my draft picks. You can't do that with SFB. You have to know what the rules and settings are. You have to take a look and try to adjust mentally to do it. And I feel like that puts the analysts and fans on a little better even footing because you all have to take a look at the settings and learn how to adjust to it. I think that's one thing I wanted to do is give people that slightly more even footing.
And we talked earlier about you going into fantasy football full time. How did that process come about, and what exactly was going through your head whenever you finally found out that, this is happening full time?
Yeah. So I was offered the job. I was offered a full-time role in the industry in February of one year. And I was actually really torn because I had 14, 15 years into a job that was 30 and out, 30 years and you retire, it's, so like I was halfway through, but my wife is the breadwinner of our family. She makes more than me. She's a badass. She's awesome. She's a strong, powerful woman. I love that about her. Right. So, and she was fairly supportive of it at the time. My back was starting to really hurt a lot and my body was wearing down from all the manual labor. And, we were in a position where I could, take the jump, and I did it. It actually took me a month or two to decide. I talked to guys I talked to Mike Tagliere, and I talked to Matt Harmon, and I talked to Matthew Friedman, and I talked to Liz Loza. Like that was like them and JJ and like Rich Rebar, like that was the group I kind of came up with, right? And like I talked to a bunch of them had just gone full time at right about the same time. So I talked to them about what the jump was like and whether or not I should do it. And I continue to tell this on podcasts and stuff that if you get that opportunity, take it, because there's so few of them. And I've literally never met a single person that made that leap and regretted it. Like not one yet. So I'm glad I did. And it was a difficult decision. It's tough giving up a secure, safe job where I'd won like awards at my, I was never going to get fired from that job. I had 15 years left and then I was going to retire, and like, it was safe and secure, 401k benefit, all that stuff. But, I eventually made the jump and I'm very, very happy I did. It's amazing to be able to do fantasy football every day as a job.
Yeah, I know when you got that and you made the announcement, I just remember that. And that's just so awesome, because we know you and we see, the tweets come across your timeline, but to actually see that, you deserve it more than anybody. So to see that, you're welcome. I mean, it was just great to see. And and I think that was like part of the time where I was like, I think more people are going to like look at this as like, this is a real career, because I think a lot of people look at it from the outside. They're like, how do you make a full-time job out of fantasy football? But yeah.
I've been doing it. I've been full-time for 4 or 5 years now. And people still say that to me when people find out that's my job, like they are completely confused by it. It's definitely still a thing.
What is something that has happened to you since becoming full-time that just kind of blew your mind? Something that you never thought would happen?
Wow. I think one of the things is probably just like connecting with people that you used to watch on TV. Probably I almost jokingly tweeted this out the other day that my most recent text messages are like people like Matthew Berry and stuff. Like if you would have told me that 5 years ago that people like that would be on my text messages, that's super surreal. I think another thing that's really weird to me that I never would have expected, and this isn't exactly a good thing, is that you work every day. I was talking to Mike Tagliere about this the other day, that like we literally work every day. It's fantasy football, but my Pepsi job, I would work 3.5, 4 days. Then for 3 days, I would not think about it at all. Right. And I have friends that work, 9 to 5 jobs. And on the weekends, like Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, it's like, it's no work at all. They don't think about work at all. And this job, like Mike and I were talking about, we need to try to strike a balance, because you work 7 days a week. You do something with fantasy football every day. I think I don't know if it was on air or off air, Kacey, but at the start of it, I mentioned something about, it's been 4 years. I have not had a day off, not a birthday, not a Christmas, nothing. I've worked literally every day for 4 years. And I think that's one of those things you don't see coming, but at least it's something you love.
Right.
But there are a lot of surreal things. I think there's a lot of wonderful things. Like when you talk to people about your job immediately if you're somewhere, if you're hanging with friends that you don't know, or a national night out or a party or something, like immediately the people in the room are like, wait, that's your job? And then they start talking to you about it. It's kind of fun. That's kind of fun. I like that too.
Yeah. Do your friends come to you for fantasy advice?
It's not any different, I'll say, because I think this goes for a lot of people in the industry, but like I've always been the fantasy football like freak in our group, the fantasy sports freak in our group. Like I've always been the guy that they came to for advice, because I was constantly talking about it and I was super immersed in it. The only difference now is it's my full-time job, instead of just being the guy that did it for countless hours outside of his real job.
Yes. Going back to what you were talking about burnout and everything, is there a way to avoid that? Or how do you kind of keep your head above water and so that you don't get burned out?
Yeah, I've seen so many people burn out in this industry, and it sucks seeing it. And I feel like I've been at that pace before, but you really need to set limits. And Matt Harmon, he told me that years ago, and I wish I would have listened harder to him about it. But one thing I have done is, for instance, you are my only, this podcast is the only podcast I'm doing in the evening this week. Like, I only do one evening podcast each week. During the day, like, that's my work day. I'll do stuff during the day, but in the evening I try to be with my family, and I try to have dinner and put the kids to bed and stuff like that. And so I try every rare once in a while, I'll have to do 2 podcasts in an evening or in a week, but one evening podcast per week has really, really helped. To set that, you have to set these little limits to try to carve out your real life from your fantasy life, because fantasy news happens all the time, and there will be no end unless you try to set some kind of limit.
Indeed. And you learn lessons as you go. When I started this podcast, or towards the middle of all the episodes that I have going on, I scheduled Mike Wright and Pat Mayo on the same night, and it was like right after I got off of work. And so I don't think I was on my game as well as I should have been, just because coming straight home from work and then having to do that. And I don't think people understand that either. Is you've got to learn how to manage your time, and it's okay to say no sometimes.
Yes. For a long time, I would say yes to going on everything. And now you do have to learn to say no. Like, you want to go on as much as you can. You want to do as much as you can, but you need to learn to set those limits. I completely agree. By the way, those guys are great guys. I've met them multiple times. Like they're incredibly nice guys.
Well, yes, and that
goes for so many people in this industry.
That's what I'm saying. When I think of people who want to have on this podcast, I have so many people that I would want to have come on here, because it's because of the community. Like, we've been talking about this entire time. Is there, when you were talking earlier about different people, you went to talk to about becoming full-time, was there anybody before you were full-time that you like kind of looked and like idolized, or kind of like respected what they were doing, kind of like wanted to use them, I guess, as a model? See, my career has been so unique. Marcus Grant mentioned this the other day on NFL. I went on NFL Fantasy the other day, and Marcus Grant mentioned that I have one of the more unique like paths in the industry. So I don't know that I wanted to model after, and this is a name I actually failed to mention when the people I talked to that I kind of came up with, or maybe I did and I've already forgotten, but Liz Loza, I talked to her. I did. I talked to her quite a bit. I was on the phone with her just the other day talking about, like, we talk about family and life and like our careers and stuff. Like, we came up at the same time, and she was one that, like, I have so much respect for Liz. Like, me too.
Like, just an incredible amount. Like, I really value her opinion. And she was one of the ones that I did have that conversation with. And like, I really take, when she gives me advice, when she says stuff, like, I really take it to heart, because I have just an incredible amount of respect for her.
Yeah. I mean, she's coming on the show. I have her booked already to come on, so I'm excited to talk to her about that, about everything. I do know she came up. It was funny when I've been on a podcast with you before on the open bar, and Liz was there as well. And we always tell the story about how, like, the first time we met, I was wearing a Scott Fishbowl shirt, and then that's how we connected, right? That's how we met, is she came up to me and was like, "Are you in the Scott Fishbowl?" And I'm like, "Yeah."
That's
"Are you?"
Awesome.
And she's like, "Yeah." And I knew who she was, but so kind of fangirl about it, but it's really cool to see that. And it's really cool that you guys have all these connections, because you guys came up at the same time.
I heard, so I was on another podcast the other week, And I heard a similar story that the guy had, this is the podcast host, he had flown into Canton for the FF Expo a couple of years ago. And he was just wearing his fishbowl shirt. And Mike Clay came up to him and he's
wow.
you want to share an Uber? Because he's like, of course you're here for the expo. So he's like, do I share an Uber? I love that even the shirts can connect people. That's crazy.
Tip: wear Scott Fishbowl shirt when I go to Canton. Okay, cool.
I'm still on the fence. That's something Liz and I were talking about the other day, that we're both on the fence about going to Canton. It's, we both have, our kids are about the same age. We both have young kids. It's one of those things where, for me, it's tough to justify just another trip, but we're both on the fence about it. That'd be cool. You're going to Canton though?
Yeah, I think,
awesome.
Like, we were gonna go last year, and so we still have a refund sitting there. So use that and go. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Nice. I know that a lot of the people that are going, are the ones that don't have kids, are the ones that don't have like obligations like that, and yeah. So, but it's cool that again the community can come together like that. So. The same as your live drafts that you want to do. Like I know everybody's amped for all of that. So
I think a lot of people are wanting to get out and be in the company of other people.
Right. Again. I mean, for sure. I mean, I feel like, I'm in Texas, so I feel like it's been like that for a while, so, but, I want to talk about podcasting real quick as well.
Sure.
Just because this podcast is for people that also are trying to put a podcast out and they just don't know what to do, or they want to be, on camera, or they want to do right, or they want to do this and that. So since you have experience with podcasting, when you first started podcasting, even if it was just guesting, wow. What did you feel like the first time you ever stepped behind the microphone?
Oh, I was nervous. I was absolutely nervous. Thoughts of, should I cancel? I don't really, am I going to say something that's am I going to screw something up? I absolutely had those feelings. I feel like I still have those feelings. I mentioned I went on NFL Fantasy last week, and I'm going on Yahoo next week. And I still have those feelings of, man, this is a big podcast. I don't want to screw something up while I'm on there, right? Those fears exist. I think you just have to get over it. Mm-hmm. I think you just have to do it, and you're going to feel much better. And one thing I always say is, when you get off, you're going to remember things that you wish you hadn't said, things that you wish you had said that you forgot to bring up. Just let it roll off you. And get on to the next show. And if you feel like you weren't good at it, just keep doing it. Because the only thing that makes you better is reps. Mm-hmm. I've learned the number one thing that makes you better at podcasting and guesting on podcasts and doing radio shows and stuff like that is just doing more of them. You just keep doing them and you get better at it. You just get a ton better. It's great when you have someone who can help you with little things. I am so incredibly blessed that I do a radio show here in Minnesota. It's a terrestrial radio show called Fantasy Football Weekly. It's been on the air for 27 years or something like that. It's the longest running fantasy podcast in the nation, or fantasy show in the nation. It's on iHeartRadio. It's now syndicated around the nation, but the host of that show is Paul Charchian, who is godfather of fantasy.
Yep.
And first fantasy publication, radio show, etc. But he is so giving with his time to help you be better at being on radio and being on podcasts and stuff like that. And he's given me tips over the last few years that I felt like I was a decent guy on radio and podcasts, and I probably was, but he's made me better. And if you can find people that are willing, and there's no shortage of people that are willing to help you be better. That's an amazing thing. And Paul he's awesome. He's so awesome. I have so much respect for Paul and all he's done. I have a job in the industry because Paul Charchian exists, right? So many of us do, because guys like Paul and Matthew Berry and guys like that exist. Because they exist, there are full-time opportunities in this industry because they pushed it to this point. But my number one thing is just keep doing it. Just get on the mic and keep doing it and get your reps in, and it'll get better. You'll get better. That's really the number one thing you need to do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And guesting on people's podcast, if you have content that you're putting out and you're wanting to spread the word on your content, one of the best ways to do that is to guest on somebody's podcast, because you're getting their fans, to listen to you and be like, I should go check their stuff out. So
absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
You never know what extra set of eyes or ears are listening or watching a different podcast or YouTube show that aren't watching the other one. Mm-hmm. So keep going on shows. Yeah. It's great advice. And
you also do Commission Impossible, which is just this crazy, awesome, completely different podcast than your normal, like, here's a bunch of stats and here's a bunch, which there's nothing wrong with those podcasts, but to find something that's completely different, but still deals with things we deal with every day, How did that idea come about?
Yeah. And your show's like that too. I love that this is a format that isn't, it's more evergreen, and it's something that's different from the norm, and people can, get a break from all those stat heavy, player heavy shows and listen to something, that's also very interesting, but also fantasy related. Commission Impossible, it came about because Ryan and I kept getting peppered with commissioner questions. And, and I love that we've become known for commissioning over the years. We've become known for our innovative leagues and just being commissioners. We decided to create a podcast to help other commissioners out, to help, to even league members can listen and bring it back to their leagues. And just one year we're like, let's do it. And so every off season we do, a dozen or 15, 20 shows every other week, going over listener questions, bad commissioner stories, interesting league settings that other people have thought of that they've emailed into us, or just the ones that Ryan and I have created that have now become like industry standards. Like it's crazy the amount of things that Ryan and I have come up with over the years that are now like, they're legitimate things out in the industry that people do in their leagues, and they might not even realize that Ryan or I created them.
Right.
Which is pretty awesome. It's pretty fun to watch those little things grow, whether it be Devi or whether it be like bankroll leagues or leagues where your blind bidding money rolls over you, or leagues where the toilet bowl champion gets the 1.13 in your rookie draft. Ryan created that. Or leagues where excuse me, or leagues where you do rookie auctions instead of rookie drafts, or I'm trying to think of Ryan's created so many that it's dispersal drafts where you have teams leave. Yes. Instead of just simply giving the team to a new owner, you auction off all the players, or you have a draft for all the players that were on those orphan teams. Ryan created that, and people probably don't realize that. It's very impressive. But we just decided we wanted to create this to help all those commissioners out, and we could send people who are asking us all these questions to this podcast. Subscribe to this, and this is where you're going to get all that information. Ask us and we'll answer it on there. And the cool thing about that show, and I mentioned about your show, it's evergreen.
Yeah.
We get people constantly who tune in, and they email us and they're like, I just started and I'm binge listening to all your episodes, because you can go back to episode 4. It's still got stuff that's relevant now. And they're only 20 to 30 minutes. They're easy to binge. It's probably one of my favorite shows to do, because I get to hang out with Ryan for 30 minutes and I get to talk about commissioning, which is such a passion for both of us.
And that is the coolest thing, when somebody reaches out to you and tells you that they've binged your show because they were so into it, So
it is really cool. Yeah, you have a very binge-worthy show as well. It's awesome getting to listen to a bunch of analysts that you respect or love or in the industry, and you listen and you hear these things and you're like, man, it's cool. You're almost like getting to know these people.
Right.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is like kind of me being selfish. I'm like, I'm going to talk to all these people that I really like, and you know, but really, I know that I have questions about things that other people have questions about. So why not bring them up to people like you? You know, so it's really cool that you guys like have come up with so many different settings, and that does happen. I'll be in a league and something like, oh yeah, you know, Scott or you know Ryan, blah 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 blah. So like, how does your mind work where you can do all that kind of stuff? Because I'm boring, plain Jane kind of chick. There's no way that I'm thinking of these crazy out of the box. So how do these ideas just come to you?
I wish I could tell you why Ryan's is. Ryan probably just has a creative,
Notebook.
interesting mind. I think for me, it's. I mentioned I'm going into year 30.
Yeah.
Like at that point, you're like, all right, I need to start being creative. I need to start thinking of crazy things that I want to try out in leagues. Like you don't want to play in the same kind of league, like your standard regular league for 30 years. Like I think mine came more along the lines of about 15 years in. I'm like, I need to create interesting ways to make this, you know, add levels of fun. I think that's just how it came for me. I maybe I have a naturally creative mind when it comes to league settings, but I feel like I've just been doing it for so long and that I can't play in a normal league anymore. I need to have something interesting to keep my interest.
I was going to ask you if you would be able to play in a normal league, or do you think you'd be like?
I play in a couple.
Yeah.
I do play in a couple fairly normal leagues, but I do it and we talk about this on Commission Impossible. I do it because of the people. Like the normal leagues I play in is because I love the people in them, or they're just like, that's it. It's the people in the league that are so awesome that I want to play in a normal league with them.
I want to ask you, because we had talked earlier about your sons, but I want to ask you about, you know, being the family man that you are, being a father, a husband. How do you balance work and, you know, being, you know, a father and a husband?
Not as well as I should. Like I try really hard. But you know, like every once in a while I can tell that I've gotten too work centric and it's rough. It's rough. That's one of the things Mike and I talked about. Take the air tags. It goes back to the balance thing. Like I have to shut it down a little more than I do now. It's one thing I'm still to this day working on. I feel like I do a good job of shutting it down on weekends and shutting it down on Friday. Like it seems like I'm still working through the weekends, and I am, but I'm doing the absolute bare minimum. You know, right. I'm checking my phone and returning emails, and I'm updating things in leagues and stuff when they pop up, but I'm doing the bare minimum on evenings and weekends. During the day, I get all my stuff done, but evenings and weekends, I try to make them as much for family as I can, and I do the bare minimum, even though I'm still working. Maybe I just need to hire someone. I need to hire someone to handle evenings and weekends a little more for me or something.
I always think about having that as something that's going to happen one day. Yeah, I'll have all these people to do these things. No, that's not going to happen, but it would be nice. Like there's not enough hours in the day. What does your family like to do in their free time? What do you guys like to do as a family?
Well, my youngest is 3, so his revolves around going for walks and wagon rides and going to the playground and stuff. The oldest loves walks too, which is great. Our house backs up to a regional park, so we go hiking on the trails a lot. That's something we've done consistently. We go on a lot of hikes through the trails and stuff. That's a ton of fun for our family. Outside of that, I think the normal stuff that families do, like in the summer, we go to the lake, we go to the the water park when we couldn't last year, but
Yeah,
normally
right.
we go to the water park. Every once in a while, we'll take a weekend to go to Great Wolf or something to the water park. There's amusement parks around here we go to. There's an amusement park in the Mall of America. So the Mall of America is actually the closest mall to my house. so that's, it's 5-minute drive, 7-minute drive, whatever away. So we go to the Mall of America and we'll go to the theme park in the Mall of America, stuff like that. Just we have, there's things to do around. I don't think we're much different than any other family in that respect.
And your oldest son, I know we talked about him at the beginning, and do you think that he's interested in fantasy football? Does he show that like he kind of wants to learn what daddy, what dad does?
So this last playoffs,
Mm-hmm.
he played in his first fantasy football league. He played fantasy playoffs, and for 3 weeks he was beating me. Like we were I ended up finishing I want to say about 15th out of the 250, 300 teams. I think he finished top 100. He kind of fell off in the Super Bowl week of it, but he's interested in it. I think this upcoming year will be his first year playing in an actual fantasy football league. But he played fantasy playoffs this year. He's shown interest. It is difficult because he knows the big names, but he doesn't really understand. I don't think he understands it yet. He just understands like the names, and he's like, "Oh, that's a good player. Let's get him in." But he doesn't understand the minutia of it.
Get down to the bottom of the draft, the end of the draft, and you're like,
"Yeah,
who is this, Daddy? Why can't why?
I don't even think he probably would think that Tom Brady is better than." He knows Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes are good, but he probably thinks Tom Brady is probably a top 3 quarterback, which maybe he will be. Who knows?
Yeah.
But big names rise for him.
Yeah, I think that's how a lot of people are when they first start playing fantasy football. Anyway, so
he probably thinks Gronkowski's the top 5 tight end. That's a better example. The name value has a lot for him right now.
It does. Before we go and before I have you plug all your stuff, I just want to ask you, because Scott Fishbowl is music themed, I just wanted to know, I have a couple of music based questions for you real quick. Nothing crazy, nothing that you're really gonna have to think too hard on, but
sure.
The first question I have is, what is your all-time favorite song?
Wow. I kind of mentioned this the other day. I honestly, I truly do not have a favorite song. I love a lot of music, I love a lot of bands. I mentioned the other day that if I had a walk-up song, it would be Sabotage by Beastie Boys. I just absolutely love that song. Everything about that song, the bridge, the break from the bridge, to everything about that song. I love that song. I'm a big Beastie Boys fan. I actually found out in St. Louis for the draft the other week that's one of Ryan McDowell's favorite bands. It's crazy. Wow. We had no idea we had that in common. I love Feeling Myself by Nipsey Hussle. That's a song that just I can turn that. I love MC Solar. Oh my gosh. Solar Plur. That is a song I absolutely love too. Have you heard that song? I'm sure you've heard that song.
I might have heard it. I don't know if I know the title. I'm really bad at
honestly, it's French. It's rap. It's French rap. I think you'd like it. I listen
to a lot of French rap. It'll come up on Spotify, so maybe I have heard it.
Yeah, I like that song. I have a lot of favorites, but those are 3 that come to mind that every time they come on, I'm like, that's my stuff, man.
Jam right there.
Right.
Is there a musician or a band that people would be surprised that you like, or maybe even just like a couple of their songs?
Maybe a little more off board. I love Eve 6. Their first album, I loved almost every song on it. And no one ever talks about Eve 6. Barely anyone. Half the people don't even know they exist.
Yeah.
But that first album, rung to me. And even though it was not on their first album, Here's to the Night is still my jam. That song gives me a ton of feels, right?
Yeah.
And but no, if I was to surprise someone, it would probably be something like that people don't think about Eve 6. And I loved their first album.
Yeah, I don't think about it. Now I'm like, oh.
I got a better one. I got a better
you got
one.
a better one?
Gin Blossoms. I love almost everything the Gin Blossoms did. They like did 2 albums and then this like one tiny, or 3 albums and this one tiny little like half album or like I love so many of the Gin Blossom songs.
I can dig that. Okay, yeah,
that shows my age though.
You know what? I promise you, like, you should see the playlist. We've got jam. I mean, they come up a lot. I promise.
Nice.
So, if you were to create the perfect, let's say, a concert tour, so like 3 bands or musicians that you would love to see on tour together, who would you pick to be together?
You know, I wish I honestly don't have an answer. Am I bringing my wife? Because if
yes,
I'm bringing my wife,
bringing your wife,
because like that's a little easier. Like I would exhume Prince and bring Prince back to life for this tour, and then I would also have Beyonce. My wife loves Beyonce, and we both like. My wife loves Prince. I like Prince. I'm a Minnesota boy, so I think it's required by law here. I'm fairly certain. I'll have to check the books, but I'm pretty sure it's required by law to like Prince in this state. Man, I don't even know if I have a third. There are bands that, you know, back in the day were totally my jam because I'm a 90s boy. I loved Bush and I liked Nirvana and I liked Pearl Jam and Aerosmith and stuff. Like I'm such a 90s kid, right? Like I was born in the late 70s, but like 90s would have been my early teenage years, and I think that's when people hit their music renaissance. They really start to connect with music in their early teenage years. It feels like, but let's make it 2. Let's just make it Prince and Beyonce, because those are the 2 that I know my wife would absolutely love to see.
That would be super dope. I think that would sell.
They could work too. They could work.
You know, that would be
Prince
great.
can work with anyone though.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you about Prince in Minnesota, so I want to know, since you just brought up age, what are the mid 30s? Because I know we've had this conversation before. That just made me think of that, but you know.
Yeah, we have, and I don't even remember where I fell on that before. Like I feel like I had a very strong opinion of that at one time, and maybe it's just because I'm like 41 now. Like I don't even care anymore. Yeah. Like I feel like the older you get, the more things like that you're just like, yeah, whatever.
It all runs together.
Yeah, it's just a thing. I feel like back in the day, I felt like it was you're 30. And then 31 to 33 was your early 30s, and 34 to 36 was your mid, and 37 to 39 was your late. Like, I feel like that's what I used to feel. Like 30 didn't feel like your 30s. It was just your 30. And then you started the early, mid, and late. But now I don't care. It is what it is.
It is what it is. Us being, you know, you said your age, I'm 37, like, but we see all these like young 20-year-olds in this industry right now. Yeah. Like, how cool is that to see, like,
it's
people
awesome.
That age coming up like that. Yeah.
It's awesome. And I'm a little jealous of their energy. Like you can tell they're so much more like they have so much more push and drive and energy than I feel like I do, or even I did when I was breaking into the industry. Like it's fun to see. It's really fun to see. They have this. It's good in any sense. Like you've been on the open bar. We mentioned the open bar earlier. Yep. It's fun going on there when you got someone that just brings an extra energy or viewpoint that you don't have, or any podcast really. And I feel like that's what this younger group that's coming in has is this energy and possibly viewpoints that we've grown up seeing things in a certain way. Maybe they have a different view on it, and it just brings something new to discuss. I like it. I love it. I love seeing it.
Yeah, I think it's super cool. It's super cool because I mean, a few years back, to think of, you know, it's just a handful of people, and now there's so many people. It's so great. And I know people are like, I've seen people talking about like competition and stuff, but really I heard somewhere the other day, I think Pat Flynn said it, but like you're complimenting somebody's playlist. So people listen to multiple podcasts, like,
right.
So you don't have to feel like I'm better than this person or whatever.
Yeah.
So. None of that.
Not at all. Like I mentioned going to those industry events, like nobody feels that way. We all feel like a rising tide raises all boats, the famous quote. We're as long as we're all pushing the same thing, if we make the pie bigger, there's plenty of pie for everyone. Right. So
exactly.
Like, I think the very first time I ever went to an industry event, I was standing talking to the footballers, and Matthew Berry made a beeline it's like the third time he's come up on this show, made a beeline to come to talk to us. And we were all talking, and like, none of us feel like we're competition. We're like all doing the same thing. We're all like, we love and respect what each other is doing. Like, we don't have that feeling that we're competition for each other. Like, it's just not really a thing. No. It's like, no, there's room for everyone in this boat.
There really is. And everybody brings such a different perspective to things. Not everybody has to have the same stuff. You're allowed to think the way you want to think and have opinions on players and put out whatever content, podcast or YouTube videos, all the TikToks and all the stuff that I'm not good at, Instagram. And
there's so many different platforms for people to do their thing on. Yeah.
Well, Android just got Clubhouse, right? And I was like, oh, well, and then I asked, is it still around? And people were like, well,
yeah.
I thought that was going to be, but then I'm like, so.
I did a lot. Like I did some Clubhouse. Like I got out my wife's old iPhone to throw it on the Wi-Fi and do some Clubhouse when it was and about a week after, it was like within 2 weeks, it had really died down. Yeah. Every once in a while, there's some good shows on there. Like there's some good panels that are worth checking out. But yeah, it has died down quite a bit. No question.
Yeah, I really did. I was so jealous. And then I was like, well, and then, now Twitter's doing kind of the same thing.
Spaces,
I say a little bit. Yeah. So yeah. And it's going to keep growing. There's going to be more and more social media stuff, LinkedIn and all this other stuff that people are like coming up with and making it their own thing. So I know I kind of went off on a tangent after talking about music, but now, this is the end of the show. So if you could, I know I hate this part, but I do like you plugging your stuff. So if you could just like tell everybody who you are, if they don't know who you are, you've been listening, so you should know. So if you, I don't know what to tell you, but go ahead.
Sure. First up, thanks for having me on this. It's awesome to watch you, watch what you've become over the last 5 or 6 years that we've known each other. Just man, it's awesome. All you've done, all the shows you go on, that it's doing raps for charity and everything you've done. It's been awesome to witness. And I'm glad you are who you are and you're doing this. And this is awesome. I love this show.
Thank you.
Scottfish24 on Twitter is where you can find just about anything I do. SafeLeaguesFantasy.com is where you can join leagues. That's my day job. We run redraft, dynasty, unique leagues. Commission Impossible. It's commishpod.com is the site, but Commission Impossible, if you search it on whatever podcast app you have, that's the show I do with Ryan McDowell. It's evergreen. You can listen to any show you want and get fun, unique, cool settings. That's most of what I do. I'm just that's mostly it. Just follow me on Twitter, and that's where you can find most of my stuff. ScottFishbowl.com, I guess, right? Sign up. I can't get you in if you don't sign up. I'm not psychic. I don't know your email. So
you heard it here first, guys. Yeah, I'm sure this is the first time you've heard that. Come on, guys. Sign up. Make sure you have your email in there right. Make sure you have your contact information in there right. And
yep.
It's fun times.
Yeah, but thank you so much for having me on.
No, I really appreciate you coming on. It was great. I really appreciate it. And all right, guys, we'll be back next week.